This regular meeting of the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority. Today is Friday. My mic went off. Today is Friday, August 16th, 10 a.m. We are in the Churchill County Administration Building in Fallon. We thank them once again for being such gracious hosts. Jeff, will you do the roll call for us?
Okay. Commissioner Ghetto, Mr. Olson, Vice Chair Frey,
Present.
Commissioner Steninger,
I'm here on Zoom.
Commissioner Bruff, Commissioner Keys, Ms. Boland,
Here.
Mr. Wagonseller, Commissioner Plaskett, Mr. Etchegary, Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Commissioner Haas,
Here.
Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Strickland,
Present.
Chair Easley,
Yep.
Ms. Carver, Commissioner Hudson, Mr. Mancebo, Mr. Evans, Commissioner Carson.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Thank you.
All right,
Commissioner.
great. Thank you.
Mr. Pereira, Mr. Odgers,
Present.
Mr. Barbie,
Present.
Mr. Tibbetts,
Present.
Commissioner Helming, Commissioner Hill, and Commissioner Vogler.
Present. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Commissioner. Thank you.
I think we have a quorum. I'd like to welcome someone this morning, Fred Perez. Fred is with Esmeralda County. He's the newly elected commissioner who will be replacing Ralph Keyes, who, no?
No.
Oh, Dee Windsor, okay. Oh, you're just his chaperone this morning. Yeah, so he's replacing Dee Windsor. I apologize for that, but welcome, Fred. And we hope... Oh, can you say that on the record, please? Your mic's off. It's a little microphone. It's, yeah.
Hopefully Fred can take my spot on this committee. That's my intention anyway.
Okay, that's great. Well, welcome. We're really glad you're with us. Thank you. Will everyone rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have some folks in the audience who would like to introduce themselves? We know you, Leanna, but please do. And feel free to join us at the table if you want to. Yeah, you can, by all means. Turn the mic on. No, it's not on. Touch the microphone.
The little red microphone.
It's green, it's on.
Yeah.
Leanna Carey, Progressive Rancher Magazine, and I also sit on the board of Churchill County Farm Bureau with Norm, who I so appreciate. And there's other boards that I sit on, and this particular Regional Central Waters Committee board has helped me so much understand the importance for the community to be involved. And thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Would anybody else like to introduce themselves? Come on up.
My name is Jeff Lomry. I just came to attend this morning.
Oh, good. Okay, well, welcome. We love visitors.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Rothberg. I'm a journalist. I'm presenting later in the meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great.
I've watched a lot of meetings and read the minutes and stuff, but I haven't been to one in person, so this is exciting for me, and I appreciate all the work you do and the conversations you have.
What a nice thing to say. And you're welcome to join us at the table, Daniel. Item number 2 is a general public comment. This board does not take any action on matters discussed under general public comment until they've been included on an agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, public comment is closed, and we'll move to item number 3, which is the approval of the agenda. Jeff, is there anything that we need to remove or anything you want to take out of order?
There are no changes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from the June 7th, 2024 CNRWA meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Commissioner Roger Mancebo, second by Wildy Brough. Any questions concerning the motion? Any discussion of that motion? Is there any opposition to that motion? With no opposition, that motion passes. Jeff, item 5, this is the financial report and quarterly expenditures. They were in your backup. I'm sure the members of the authority have had an opportunity to review those. Is there anything you want to go over, Jeff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I guess, with regard to the budget detail that's in the packet, the backup, that is for the month of June 2024. So essentially, it is a preliminary or unaudited final budget report for our past fiscal 23-24 fiscal year. And I just want to point out a couple of highlights there, I guess. One is the WCII grant. We'll be getting into a little bit of detail there in just a minute. That's the Water Conservation Infrastructure Initiative grant that we received from the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So the first reimbursement that I submitted for expenditures related to the Water Rights Retirement Program was $38,249.75. 2 other reimbursement requests were also submitted, and again, I'll mention that in just a minute. And overall expenses, not including what's pending approval today for invoices and invoices that were approved at the prior meeting that have not yet been processed. So far, the costs associated with that program are $86,847.86. We had budgeted $150,000 for that. Aside from that, everything else is pretty straightforward, I believe. Moving on, there are tabs 2B through 2. Through 2H, which are various invoices, starting with Nevada Authority Management LLC, my LLC for managing this organization, and a progress report or timesheet, if you will, and the and all of the receipts. You might have noticed, which I'm including now as part of the standard report, are the highlighted sections or entries, and those are to track my time relative to the Water Conservation Infrastructure grant. So we're using my time as in-kind match. And for this most recent reporting period, which is April, whatever it is, since the last meeting, April 9th through August 8th, I logged about, well, not about, 34 and a half hours, which will be an in-kind match. And then again, the various receipts. Tab 2C is Sam Merlino's invoice for doing the minutes for us, and we really appreciate Sam doing those minutes. Tab 2D are 2 invoices from Resource Concepts, Inc., and the first invoice is 240924 for $7,751.25, and it also references, and I apologize, I didn't hand this out earlier, but I did send it out last night. If anybody needs a copy of this, but the actual invoice that's outstanding, which is referenced, and that is invoice 24-0755 for $3,233.75. I have the actual invoice here, and I sent it out via email again yesterday, so that is the second invoice from Resource Concepts, Inc. And then there are 3 invoices from Leonard Law, invoice 949 for a total of $4,875, invoice 963 for $3,412.50, and then invoice 983 for $900. for a total reimbursement from Leonard Law for, again, the water rights, the water conservation infrastructure grant is $9,187.50. And I would note that both RCI's invoices and Leonard Law's invoices are reimbursable through the grant program. Tab 2F, Conrad Communications, invoice again reimbursable for $625. This is work related to the second round of applications for water rights retirement. Tab 2G, advertising the Eureka County Star for the second round, $200, also reimbursable. The invoice under tab 2H from Nevada Central Media for $285. That's to establish an email account specifically for the Water Rights Retirement Program. And again, all of those are reimbursable. So that pretty much concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jeff? Is there a motion to pay the bills?
Move to approve.
Motion by Commissioner, who are you? Norm
Bob.
Frey.
Bob.
Second,
Second by Lori Carson.
pardon me? Yes,
Second.
yes, yes. No, Lori, we have a second in the room. It's a second
Okay.
by Commissioner Wallace Thomas.
All right.
Any questions concerning the motion? Any additional discussion? Is there any opposition to that motion? With no opposition, that motion passes. Item number 6, and this is an item that was sponsored after a discussion that Norm Frey and I had. This is a discussion and possible action for a performance bonus for Executive Director Jeff Fontaine. I just want to, pardon me? Yeah, why don't you do that? Get out. Yeah.
Okay. I'd rather he stayed.
He's always so shy about money.
Yeah, I know. I am one of the founding members of this organization, and I can say unequivocally that Jeff is absolutely the best executive director we have ever had. We have made some tremendous strides in the years that we have been meeting, and we have received recognition in the state and respect from legislators that we never had before. We have implemented absolutely some groundbreaking programs, and this is all because of Jeff's leadership and his vision for this organization. I think he is deserving of a bonus which would demonstrate our pleasure, if you will, with how he has performed and the level to which he has brought this organization. And Norm or Roger, I'd love it if you wanted to dogpile on that because you were here in the early days too.
You know, I started working with Jeff directly at Nevada Association of Counties in 2006. It's been a pleasure all the way along. But these last couple of years, and with the current programs that he is putting together that are putting Central Nevada Regional Water Authority on the map, just beyond the pale. And we can't thank him enough. I know he was up all night last night, or way late last night, working on this. This is where his heart is, and I think he's deserving of, I would propose a $5,000 performance bonus. And I'll do that in the form of a motion, but I want to hear from Roger as well, because he's been with Jeff a long time as well.
Your mic's off. Your mic is off.
As I second this, I would like to ditto what both of you have said. I started with him clear back in 2006. Is that when he became?
We actually worked with him, Roger and Norm. We worked with him before that when he was with NDOT.
That's
because he
right.
was the director at NDOT, and we
Right.
worked with him extensively then.
That's very true. And he's been a professional. That's one of the things that You know, if you ask me if to say what he is like, I would say he's a professional. He would never let us down. But I agree that at this time, a $5,000 bonus would be apropos.
All right. And I have already looked at our budget before I even talked to Norm to make sure that this is something that we could afford, and we are in great financial shape. So 5,000, I think, Norm, if that's what you want to do, that I think it's absolutely appropriate. We can afford it. The money is in the budget. There is a motion on the floor by Commissioner
Madam
Frey.
Chair?
Yes, Nancy, Commissioner Boland.
Yeah, you forgot the other founding mother. I also have worked with Jeff and have been
Yes.
his boss when I was president of NACO. And I got to say, the man is superb. He thinks fast on his feet. He always has his facts organized when he speaks to legislators. And I couldn't agree more that he deserves not only a bonus, but we might think about giving him a raise next year.
Well, I'll certainly let you bring that up at the appropriate time, Commissioner. Yeah, you did.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
This is
Commissioner
Lori
Carson.
Carson. Yes. I go way back. I first worked with Jeff when I took office back in 2007. And I know that man has just been, I couldn't ask for anybody more responsive. I appreciate him. And I've never had to work with him, even when I was president of NACO, that he's ever been in a bad mood. He's always been gracious and there to help in any way that he can. And I think he certainly deserves this, and I support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Yeah, he's so well respected in the state, and that lends a tremendous amount of credibility to this organization. Thank you. Is there anything else from any other member of the board? Any other additional comment? Is there any opposition to the motion that was made by Commissioner Frey and seconded by Commissioner Mancebo? With no opposition, that motion passes. Thank you very much. Norm, you're going to go grab him and tell him to come back in. That was almost like a couple of eulogies, wasn't it?
Better to hear him while you're alive.
Yeah, Nancy, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah. I just told the board that there were quite a few members who had wonderful things to say about you, and I said, yeah, this was like listening to several eulogies, but Jeff, you've done just a wonderful job for us. We cannot express our appreciation enough, so we hope that a $5,000 bonus, which was approved unanimously by this board, will demonstrate our appreciation to you. You deserve that. Don't cry. Everybody in the room will be.
Well, I'm very humbled. This was unexpected, but very much appreciated, and I don't know what else to say, except it's been just a true joy to work for this organization, to represent this organization, and I really appreciate all of your support and confidence in me, and again, just it's an honor to work with all of you, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And with that piece of business taken care of, oh, how do we cut you a check? You'll take care of that, won't you? You'll find a way, okay. Item number 7 is a discussion and possible action to prioritize applications submitted by groundwater right owners in Diamond Valley. Jeff, you can read the rest of the agenda item yourselves. You know this is a continuation of what we've been discussing in past meetings. And Jeff, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So, you all familiar with this program, but just a kind of a quick refresher on how we got to where we are. First of all, as you know, CNRWA applied for and was awarded a $7 million grant under the Nevada Water Conservation Infrastructure Initiative, which is administered by the Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And it was available basically to retire water rights in basins where they're being overpumped and overappropriated. And it's only, the funding is only to be used for retiring water rights from willing owners and to compensate them. So the funding is to compensate willing owners to retire their water rights for retiring their water rights. So February 9th this year, excuse me, this Central Nevada Regional Water Authority Board of Directors approved the criteria for purchasing and retiring groundwater rights, or the criteria for basically prioritizing those rights in the entire Central Hydrographic Region. So it wasn't just in Diamond Valley. However, as it turned out, the only applications that we received for retiring water rights in the Central Region was from Basin 153 of the Diamond Valley. And so per the agreement that, the funding agreement that CNRWA has with DCNR, we needed to submit to them by February 1st, thereabouts, a list of prospective groundwater purchases, and again, in a ranked order. So that list includes 35 applications from 8 individual water right owners, individuals and businesses in Diamond Valley, and that total combined duty of all 35 applications was 11,897 acre-feet, and the total cost associated with purchasing that amount of water was $10,112,450. On May 16th of 2024, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources increased the grant award to CNRWA to $10,200,671.59. And that was done because of there were more applications in Diamond Valley than there was funding available, and that that money was moved from the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, where the department felt like that Diamond Valley, because of the large demand in Diamond Valley relative to what the impact might be in the Humboldt Basin, made the decision to move the additional funding from HRBWA to CNRWA. They also increased the overall funding amount beyond that by, I think, another $1 million. So that increased the amount of money. During the same time, or since that time, one of the 8 applicants that was approved on February 9th is the Moyle family. And since that time, the Moyle family has reduced the amount of water by about 2/3 that they were interested in retiring. And so that freed up yet additional funding. So as a result, we had anticipated, at least initially, about $1.4 million available to retire additional water rights. That would be in addition to everybody else on the list that this board approved on February 9th. So we've been able to fund everybody on that February 9th list and still have about $1.4 million available for additional water rights. So consequently, we opened a second round of applications to retire groundwater rights, and it was in Diamond Valley, since that's where we had more applications than we did funding initially, and didn't have applications from any place else. And that application, second round, was open from July 15th to August 5th, and we received 3 applications. One from William Norton for 44.4 acre-feet, and Mr. Norton was on the original list as well, but this was one, he had not included this in his initial application for whatever reason, but when he found out that we were doing the second round, he included this. So that's one of the applications. The second application is from Jeff Lamoury, and I should note for the record that it's listed as Jeff Lamoury's application here in the packet, but the actual application and water right owner is JWL Properties LLC. So going forward, just keep that in mind. And then lastly, we received an application from Larry Weishart, and both Jeff Lamoury and Larry Weishart's, well, we'll get into the details of how much they're willing to retire. So we didn't have a whole lot of time, and Resource Concepts, Inc., our contractor that is doing all the due diligence on these applications, did a great job. They completed the due diligence pretty much last Friday, but they were still waiting for verification from the Division of Water Resources regarding the amount of pumping that was reported on the applications, just to make sure everything was lined up, and also look at, again, are there encumbrances on the water rights, or are there other issues associated with those water rights? And so all of that information and then some is in your packets, and I apologize for the sort of the way it was transmitted, because again, with the short turnaround time to get the information, to do the due diligence, and more importantly, to do the analysis so that we can have a discussion based on the data and the rankings and so forth today. We'll get into the details of what the rankings look like, but at this point, before we do that, I guess I would just ask if there are any questions related to anything I said so far before we get into the details.
And Jeff, did you make it clear, and it went by me, that this additional backup was sent to everybody via email this morning?
Well, yeah, so I kind of alluded that. I mean, that's the second, I think, or third additional email that, I mean, because we'd sent out some email earlier with some information, and then when RCI did their analysis, and then we looked at it and we made some comparisons, we had to make adjustments. So to answer your question, everything that we'll be discussing today has been sent out to you.
Yes.
Via email, and we'll go over what those documents are.
Yeah, okay.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll note that, all the original applications were in the original packet, so all of the
Yes.
information to be used to develop these spreadsheets was available to everybody quite a while ago.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I want to add this. As far as where we are, you may be wondering, where are we on the original 8 applications? I'm happy to report today that 6 of the 8 applicants have executed water rights retirement agreements. And so we'll be opening escrow for those 6. And escrow will close September 16th. We've had requests for closing earlier, but we're getting very close on the 6th. The other 2, it's not that they're not interested, but they're waiting for some additional information, but we expect to have them under agreement here hopefully by the end of next week. And so
So Jeff, or let me ask first, Jake, is there anything that you want to add to this?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So nothing I want to add. Maybe Jeff, clarity though. I think there's at least in my mind, I'm not quite certain how much funding we have remaining available.
That's what I was just going to ask.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I had some information that I wanted to present to the group under the last item, and that was basically related to that question. So let me see if I can find my information here. Okay. First of all, well, let me back up. Sorry, I've had several different spreadsheets here. Okay. My latest estimate, and this is subject again to some minor adjustments with the amount of water that we'll end up purchasing from at least one applicant here, plus or minus another 40 acre-feet. And then also what our final administrative costs will come in at. I think everything else is pretty well budgeted. But I had budgeted $150,000 for our administrative costs, and I think we'll come in lower than that, although not much. So I guess the best answer I can give today is it looks like we will have $1,726,000, thereabouts, so 1.7, let's say $1.7 million. Remaining, after we.
Remaining.
After we compensate and retire the water rights on the in the initial round, our administrative costs, and then our escrow fees are $23,194, so.
Okay.
That's what I think we'll have left over.
And what are the plans for that? Another round?
No, this is for what we're talking about today.
Oh,
For
okay,
funding
for
the-
this.
For this.
Okay.
For the.
It include, yeah. Okay, for this. Okay.
For this.
What kind of a motion would you like to see come from the board?
Well, the first thing we need to do is maybe just go over some of these charts, because they got sent out this morning. We worked on these late last night, early this morning, so it may not be clear to everybody what these various spreadsheets are. So I just want to make sure everybody is clear as to that. I also want to make sure that we're all clear on what the criteria are, and assuming that this board adopts the same criteria or uses the same criteria as you use and adopted at your February 9th meeting, which is what I would recommend. And also at the February 9th meeting, the board wanted to see entire operations retired as opposed to going through permit by permit. So for example, on February 9th, there were 8 applicants, but there were 35 different applications. And what the board decided was, we'll retire the water rights by applicant, not by application. And so I think that would be something you'd want to do here as well.
Okay.
Now, so assuming that's the case, the second thing is to make sure that whatever you decide today in terms of the ranking, and it's only 3 of them, so, you know, it should go pretty quickly, I think, but you want to make sure that, number one, we're still waiting for 2023 pumping data from the Division of Water Resources, I believe, but we have the previous 4 years, so we just need that 1 year, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get it in time, but I think at this point, 4 years is probably a pretty good indication, and if we can get the 5th year verified by the Division of Water Resources, that would be great, but we want to make sure all of that's verified. We want to make sure that the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources looks at this, because they have the final approval, since they're the ones funding this program. And then the last thing, which is a standard condition has been a standard condition in this program, is all the conditions of the due diligence, and if we get to the point of having an agreement and the various documents, all of those conditions are met by the willing seller in order to finalize the water right retirement. So those recommendations, but then of course we need to have you prioritize the 3 applications to send.
Yeah, Jeff,
send off.
do you have a recommendation on the ranking?
Well, based on what we have analyzed in these spreadsheets, and I want to acknowledge and thank Jake Tibbetts for putting, so what you're looking at is the initial ranking that was provided by Mr. Tibbetts based on the criteria from the adopted by the February 9th meeting by this board, and his analysis using that criteria. And then there are other, so let me just take a break here and tell you that when RCI did their ranking, they used a different number for the banked water. And without getting into a lot of detail, and speaking with Jake this morning, the banked water isn't really part of the calculation. It was put in the spreadsheet for the February 9th meeting, and also for this meeting, simply to point out that any water that is approved for, any water right that's approved for retirement by this board today includes the banked water. It does not affect the calculation of the ranking in any way, or the cost per unit share under the groundwater management plan. So that has clarified things for me, because there was an inconsistency between what RCI was looking at and what Jake had analyzed. And so,
Hey, Jeff and Madam Chair,
go ahead, Jake.
you mind?
Yeah, no, please.
So, though, on the state, there's a requirement that this is not just a windfall paper exercise, right? I mean, the intent of this is to immediately reduce pumping as well as helping over appropriation. And so if you look at comparison to what they did in like the Humboldt River region, it was based on water pumped. So by including the banked water and seeing that actually is an indication of water pumped. The more water that's banked means the less water that's pumped, okay? But under the groundwater management plan, you want people using less in the early years and banking water. So it's just to give the whole picture. And the reason that the board previously made action for the banked water to go with it is because you're buying the entire permit. And that all the water that's banked under the Diamond Valley Groundwater Management Plan is under that permit. So if you're buying the entire permit, you are buying some areas that are not being irrigated potentially. So that's where the banked water is coming from, is areas that aren't being irrigated. So that's why it's all part of the calculus. It's just to be transparent, show everybody what's going on. But the way the board had done it in February is based on what you're seeing on the screen. It was per Diamond Valley Groundwater Management Plan share. And that is the way, if you want to get the biggest bang for the buck in Diamond Valley, that's the way to do it, is pay per share, because that equals wet water.
Okay, all right, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. That is very helpful. So based on what I just described and based on this spreadsheet that you're looking at that everybody has, and that's actually the spreadsheet that was sent out to you, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday. Lost track of time, I'm sorry. I'm happy to pull up any one of 3 or 4 other spreadsheets that look at the banked water for not just the 2023 end of year, but 2023 end of year plus the 24 allocation. But again, that doesn't affect the calculation of the cost per unit share of the groundwater management plan. And so if you are going to retire rights based by applicant and not by individual application, this is the ranking that you would see. The Norton application for 44.4 acre feet, the Lamourie applications, so there's total.
Which is JML?
Yes, thank you. JWL Properties would be second, and
OW.
Weishart applications, the 4 applications there would rank third based on that criteria.
All right, thank you.
And Madam Chair, sorry to jump in.
Yeah, Jake, please.
And I'll just note the memo that Jeff put, it's in all our packet under his recommendation on this. That is the motion the board made in February.
Yeah.
I feel we need to be consistent with that previous.
Yeah. So Jake, in light of that, you can certainly make a motion to that regard. You are an alternate, and you can make that motion.
Okay. I'll make the motion that we rank the applications based on the way we did it. This board did it on February 9th, 2024. Specifically, the applications are ranked according to the Diamond Valley Groundwater Management Plan shares, according to dollar per share. And all the banked water tied to those permits as of today would be included in the retirement. Any remaining funding that's left over after retiring a full applicant or operations applications as structured here. So that'd be Norton first, Lamourie second, and Weishart third. If they're expected to only fund a portion of the next ranked application, Director Jeff Fontaine will work with the applicant to retire the water rights that make the most sense operationally and administratively, such as full total combined duty groups, while also reducing the most pumping subject to approval by the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So I know that was lengthy, but that is written.
No,
If anybody else-
that's exactly the way it had to be said. There's a motion on the floor by Jake Tibbetts. I'm not going to restate the motion. Is there a second to
I'll
that
second it.
motion?
I will second that motion.
Second
Frey.
by Commissioner Frey. Are there any questions concerning that motion or additional discussion or questions on this item? Is there any opposition to the motion? With no opposition, that motion passes. Thank you. And Jeff and Jake, you did a yeoman's job. Thank you. We appreciate all your heavy lifting very much.
Madam Chair, I'd like to also acknowledge RCI and Leonard Law for this effort as well. Tremendous amount of work, and they really
Yes.
helped make this possible.
Agreed. Thank you. All right, we're moving to item number 8. We're going to hear a presentation by Daniel Rothberg, who's in the room with us. So grab a seat. I'm assuming you're going to drive. Are you going to drive there? And he's going to be doing a presentation on the changing communication landscape and the opportunities and challenges of breaking down complex water issues for a general audience. And I have to tell you, I couldn't wait to hear this.
Madam Chair, if I can just do a quick introduction.
If you would,
of
please.
Daniel. So I've known Daniel for some time. He started out with as a staff reporter with the Las Vegas Sun. I think I may have still been with NACO at that time. I don't remember.
I think so, yeah. Probably.
Yeah, so
It was
2015, yeah, okay. And then Daniel moved to the Nevada Independent, and as yeah, and then
That's where I read the name. the
recently,
Nevada
so he was with Nevada Independent till about, what, 2016, and then, no, excuse me, 2017 to 23, and then Daniel called me one day, and others as well, to let us know that he was leaving the Independent to do his own thing as an independent journalist, and now publishes what's called the Western Water Notes. So we really appreciate him reporting on a lot of the work that we do. And specifically on this presentation, I was not present for this presentation at the most recent Nevada Water Resources Association annual conference where it was presented, but I was going through some of the presentations that I had missed, and I came across this, and I thought, wow, this is really something that we, I think would be really interesting. So we're glad Daniel was able to make it, and I guess I'll just let him start.
Yeah, thanks for having me. They're so cool. You get to, yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, I worked for the Nevada Independent for about the past 6 years, a little bit more. And I focused on water, other environmental issues too. And so I think it's really important to just share kind of the experience of being a journalist in 2024 with, with everybody, any group really. I also, one other, just to give a little bit more perspective too on where I kind of approach some of these issues. I served on the Nevada Press Association board starting in 2021 through the end of last year. And it really gave me a good perspective on kind of the state of the industry across Nevada, some of the history of how Nevada journalism has developed, how it's changed over time, and the importance of it, especially local journalism. So I will caveat that this is not a lot of the things that I'm talking about really apply to local journalism more than anything else, and the kind of local regional information system, not national news, cable news, or anything like that. I think I think it's important to define that before I start talking, because journalism encompasses a lot, and it should. It's constitutionally, the way the Nevada Supreme Court looks at it, there's a lot of different types of journalism that fit into the bucket of journalism, and it's important that we have lots of voices in journalism. But I just wanted to make that note. And as Jeff said, I gave this at the Nevada Water Resources Association, so some of it might be repetitive if there are people on Zoom or here that heard that, but Yeah, I guess just to kind of start with where what I see as the value of journalism and the value of, in communities, journalism shines a light. Sometimes it's a good light. Sometimes it's not as pretty, probably from, the perspective you're sitting in as county managers, county commissioners, and things like that. But it is really important to have information that can, raise public awareness for issues and sort of put a mirror to our systems and kind of test, and probe what's working, what's not working, where do we maybe need to make changes. Our taxpayer funds being spent in a way that is serving the public that pays those taxes. Basic things about how government functions and how democracy sort of functions. And journalism also offers accountability and oversight. There's been all sorts of social science studies that have come out recently, as there's this conversation in my industry about shrinking journalism, especially on the local level, talking about how when there are journalists that are coming to public meetings that are reporting on fire, police, essential social services, you do see, taxpayer money being spent in a more, efficient way, and there's someone there to kind of hold people accountable. Let's see, where should I point this? Okay, sorry. Oh. So I think with water especially, I live in Reno. Before that, I lived in Vegas. I'm initially from Southern California. And I would say the way that I mainly interact with water is by turning on the tap, turning on the shower, watering plants, things like that. And that's pretty disconnected from where water is coming from in all of those places. And I think good water journalism and good environmental journalism can make some of those connections so the public can understand, where their water is coming from, the costs and consequences, and, the impacts of that water use. So a big goal for me in my work doing journalism, doing kind of research writing around water, is to kind of increase water literacy for the public. And I think that plays out in, every community. And just looking at the complexity, I think the last item demonstrated, how complicated dealing with water rights are. And even buying back water rights, there's all sorts of things you have to go through and hoops you have to jump through. And, I don't know if anyone here has had the pleasure of looking through a permit file in Carson City, but, it's not always clear where, how that water has been used over time. So I think breaking down some of that complexity and, at the end of the day, this is a public resource, appropriated for private use and economic uses. But, in early on, Nevada, as many other Western states did, it decided, in their statutes and kind of foundational laws that water belongs to the public. So I think in that sense, journalism plays an important role in kind of monitoring where water is going and how it's used. Just to give a sense of, I for a long time, I kind of saw journalism is like this own ecosystem, its own sort of information space. But the reality is we all are in the information space, regardless of what we do. I think, if you're an elected politician, you're in the information space just as much as I am in telling stories. Especially and I'll get to it probably in the next slide, but with the rise of AI and misinformation and the ability to put out false information, I think more than ever, media literacy is really important. And so this is just some of the trends that I've seen. Journalism is concentrated and shrinking. Just in the past few months as I did this presentation, there's been a lot of layoffs at different outlets, both in Nevada and outside of Nevada. And a big problem I see is the concentration of journalism. Instead of having journalists located in the communities that they're covering, more and more journalists are concentrated in, LA, in DC, in New York. And I think trying to kind of solve that problem, it could go a long way in providing, you need boots on the ground to kind of verify what's going on. I think part of this trend is just how people consume news is changing, and I don't think I'm sharing anything new with you. We get a lot more information off the internet, off Twitter, off podcasts, off TikTok, and a lot less from just traditional broadsheet newspapers. So I think that's something to be aware of. If you're thinking about this issue of journalism shrinking, but also in kind of putting out messages and relaying messages to your constituencies. Like, people are in different places, and it's a challenge for me as well. I think the saying that I have is there's more stories than there are journalists. The idea of a scoop is kind of going away to an extent, because a lot of things are scoops, because there are a lot of stories that go unreported. I think one really great sign is, and I'll get to this a little bit more, but local startups and newsletters are really filling in the gap. I know here in Fallon, there's been some efforts to start kind of to bring more news outlets to Fallon, which has been great. And on the one hand, even though I know I sounded a little gloom and doom in this slide, but it's easier than ever to start an outlet. You can start a newsletter with 1 or 2 people, and you don't have the overhead that you used to have with printing costs and delivery costs and things like that. So this is just a map. This is from the University of North Carolina, and they map sort of where news deserts are. I really like this map, and they also map sort of the changing ways that people are consuming news. I like this map on the one hand because it shows where, the density of newspapers, where there are no newspapers, just one newspaper. But I also think this map kind of obscures the problem a little bit, because, there could be a place like Reno or Vegas where there is 1 or 2 newspapers, but you're not necessarily, you're still not necessarily getting that really good local news or community news that, people rely on to make decisions. Let's see, I think I messed this up again. So for me, and I hope people in this room can relate to this, one of the big challenges in writing about water and communicating on water issues, I think, is this hydrological cycle. And I can't remember which institution put this out, but it's from a social science paper way back. And it basically is talking about how people, really tune into these water issues when there is a crisis, when, they see Lake Mead dropping, or they, can really, Washoe Lake dries up. They see the drought impacts firsthand, and the public, starts freaking out about it. And there's this huge amount of concern, which leads to panic. And then, the West being what it is, with kind of our boom and bust hydrology, we'll often get big storms and rains and flooding, and people all of a sudden are like, well, we have enough water, and don't, they tune out. And I think kind of flattening the cycle is really important, communicating on these topics, because the reality is that, these issues of overappropriation, these issues of, how to share water resources, they don't go away just because of 1 or 2 good years. Oftentimes, talking about groundwater just now with Diamond Valley, there's a lag time to some of these things. There's a lag time to overpumping, and you can see the impacts even in a bad year. I think just going back to what I was talking about before, for anyone who is doing information, in the information space, which I think kind of includes everyone, that's working in public policy, working on some of these issues, finding creative ways to get information out, I think is important, and that might be with sort of shorter items than a traditional news article. That might be, a reel on Instagram or TikTok, and putting out graphics, multimedia. I think kind of visualizing where water goes is really, really helpful and important to people because, there's only so much you can do with words, but there's a lot you can do with photo, and that pains me to say. But there's a lot you can do with photos, and you can do with story maps, and there's all sorts of really cool mapping tools. I could go on and on, but there's a lot of agencies out there that are starting to do this, government agencies, and it's good to see because I think it recognizes the reality that people aren't just necessarily getting the newspaper in the morning and getting their news through that. So one of the projects I'm working on, I'm working on a book project focused on water development in the Great Basin and really looking at over appropriation and how it developed over time. And then also to the last slide, efforts to kind of use less to correct the problems of the past. And it's really, in some ways, what I found is that the issue is similar in a lot of places, and not just Nevada, all across the West, where there are more rights to use water than there is water to go around. You see similar conflicts between surface water and groundwater, with surface water developing first, and that having a senior, typically a senior right, and then groundwater being junior, and how to manage that. But I think it's really important to recognize, and this is one of the reasons, I think local journalism is so important, is every place is really different. And the best way to get a sense of what's going on in a place is to go out and ground truth and interview people and talk to people and, dig into the county minutes and things like that to get a sense of what's going on. Because the geology is different in different places, the hydrology is different, and the way things kind of cycle is different. Some of the common themes that I've come across in my reporting on water, and I think I just mentioned a couple of them, is kind of how to look at water issues through this legal framework where there's more water rights than there is supply, but for all sorts of political, economic, social, cultural reasons, it's difficult to curtail, which is really the one tool that the law gives state regulators. And this, again, is not just true in Nevada, it's true in other places. I was in Idaho recently. I did a story on the Snake River proposed curtailment there, and there's a lot of similarities, differences, but similarities. I think also kind of looking at the scientific and the regulatory reality and how they are aligned or misaligned, and how that has played out over time is kind of a theme that I'm looking at. Some of the early perennial yield groundwater basin budgets basically made the assumption that springs were going to run dry or springs were going to decrease. Well, that was a problem, or that some groundwater pumping was going to capture surface water. Well, that turned out to be a problem when there are senior water rights that people had to those surface water sources. So looking at kind of the science, how the science informs regulation and has informed it over time, and what it takes to cut back and reduce use. It's really hard. Like, I think that is something that we may take for granted. Like, it's hard. It takes a lot of community discussion. It takes a lot of kind of, frankly, information, setting these baselines of where we're at and where we need to be. I think for me, another great thing about writing about water, and I think for a lot of different beats in journalism, is it really does fuse a lot of different disciplines. It's not just, to me, it's not just about, the water rights. It's about, the politics, the hydrology, the ecology. I think one of the really unique things about water is because we have a first in right, first in time system, everything is linked back to historical decisions, to past decisions. So kind of going back in time and seeing how did we get here. And it really makes it tough because both the people who made those decisions, you know, they're not the regulators today, but they live with those decisions. And the people, you know, who have the water rights, they didn't necessarily have a say in all of the things that are included in their permit file, but that is a part of the permit. So the history is really interesting to me, economics, geography. I think my approach to water reporting really is to provide some context. You know, I think there's for a long time in journalism this idea that you had to have both sides, you know, which I think is important to have a lot of different perspectives. But sometimes there's, you know, 8 sides or 10 sides. When I was at the Lower White River Flow System hearings, I think there were maybe like 10 or 12 parties to the hearings. I probably heard like 15 or 16 theories about how the hydrology of that system worked. So, you know, there's a lot of different perspectives and kind of trying to fuse those together. I think one of the interesting things to me that has, for my, I wanted to share a little bit about my reporting process and sourcing. For me, I really, the quantitative data is really important. But also sort of the qualitative data, going out and doing interviews and talking to people. One of the really unique things about water, in my experience, is that a lot of information isn't written down. It's kind of like contained through firsthand knowledge, through the knowledge of people who are working with the water or working on the land. So interviews are really helpful because you can get a sense of how things have changed over time. Also, archive material. You know, there's a lot of government reports and studies and testimony and newspaper archives. And this has really illustrated for me the importance of local journalism and having a record, because I've relied very heavily on the newspaper record, you know, from the late 1800s to the kind of mid 1900s. One thing that's kind of fun to do if you have free time, the Library of Congress actually has a bunch of old digitized newspapers from the late 1800s. It's kind of weird. They actually have older papers, but they don't have as many kind of newer mid 20th century papers. But going through that, it can give you a really great sense of kind of how communities developed, how they talked about some of these issues. And like I said, you know, the truth isn't always pretty. I've read things in those papers that are not don't always put people in the best light. Likewise, if you really want to dig, the University of Nevada, Reno's library, they have a ton of microfilm you can go through, and if you're ever up there, I highly recommend it. Even just looking at how many papers they have, it really gives a good sense of, kind of a sobering sense of like how robust local journalism has been in the past and kind of where we're at right now. So these are just a couple examples of some of the archival work that I will do in some of my research. You know, this one's from the Las Vegas Age, talking about some, you know, public land laws and probably a little bit of speculation. I like the font that they used on this Metropolitan Water District, very kind of Art Deco in line with the Hoover Dam and all that stuff. I think for me, one of the, you know, emerging issues that I've really focused on and, you know, I've been thinking a lot about in looking back into the past is kind of conjunctive management, because not everywhere, you know, the Las Vegas Valley is a good example of a place that started out, you know, tapping into their groundwater and then eventually moved to surface water. But in a lot of places, for a variety of different reasons, surface water, you know, was developed first. It has a priority over groundwater rights that were developed later when, you know, electricity came into some of these places, and it was a lot more affordable and cost-effective and reliable to tap into groundwater. I think, you know, again, this is sort of similar slide, but kind of piecing together the full story is, to me, really looking at this historical lens. And it's doing these interviews and having someone on the ground. And again, it's kind of why I see local journalism as really important. So this is just kind of like my takeaways from interviews. Again, kind of anecdotal, but I think that there are, I actually am pretty hopeful. I think that there are a lot of solutions. I think what I found is that, in kind of the rush to reclaim water around the West in sort of the reclamation movement in the early, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were kind of a lot of engineering solutions, one size fits all, sort of solutions that were worked for a lot of communities, but also didn't work for a lot of communities, and kind of led to some of the over-appropriation problems that we have today. What I've found is that in talking to people, people are really looking for flexibility, people are really looking for certainty, and a lot of these solutions are distributed. What might work in Las Vegas, removing turf from irrigated landscape, might not work in another place. And so I think kind of finding solutions within the confines of the law are really important, but also having the flexibility to have those discussions about what works locally. The other thing that I found is leadership and honesty can go a really long way. It's kind of tough in water, everybody has a different opinion, but having somebody who can really define what the issue is that you're trying to solve, and a framework for potentially getting there can go a long way. And someone who's honest about what needs to be done, which often I think is kind of cutting back when there are these situations of overappropriation. And then I think the really unique thing about water is that power is sort of distributed. You have these people. I have a slide up there of the Colorado River Water Users Association, and that was a panel with the principals from all the 7 basin states, so kind of the top Colorado River negotiators from all these states. But it kind of occurred to me watching this panel that the most important people in the Colorado River discussion are the people who are sitting, listening in the room, because they have the water rights and they have a tremendous amount of control in what solutions actually are possible and not possible.
Daniel, where's that sign at the lower right? Turf removal mandate?
I forget which neighborhood it's
Is it in
but
Nevada?
it was in Las Vegas.
Oh, it's in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
okay.
So that was a response to AB 356 required the removal of non-functional or decorative turf in the Las Vegas, or that uses Colorado River water by 2026. And so, Las Vegas gets 90% of its water from the Colorado River. And so their water portfolio projections looking into the future, trying to match supply and demand, really rest on conservation, on reducing demand. So one of the easiest ways and probably most cost-effective ways of doing that in the Las Vegas Valley is removing irrigated turf, because since they recycle a lot of their indoor water, they the big water consumer in Las Vegas is like outdoor landscaping, especially in places where where there isn't much that's not a playground or a park, a median in the middle of the road, or a rotary or something like that. So I guess this is kind of the last slide I have, but one of the things that I really come to appreciate or have really have thought a lot about, both working in the Nevada Independent, writing about water, but also doing work with the Nevada Press Association and trying to find creative ways, solutions, policies to incentivize local journalism, is that we are really, it is a community effort, truly. I think journalism is, I rely on my audience for support, for sources, for information, You know, I can't do my job without, without the audience. But I also think in trying to find some of these solutions for how to encourage local journalism, I think it requires a lot of work both on the industry side, but I also think that we need to do a better job as journalists in communicating with the communities that we serve, how they can help us, and the value that we bring. I do think of local journalism as almost like a utility, it's similar to energy or water. I mean, it's different than energy or water, different type of infrastructure. But I do think that journalism can lead to healthy conversations and healthy communities, and having baseline facts and information is really important. I'm hoping that the industry will consider potentially policies that incentivize local journalism. Some other state houses have looked at legislative bills and policies to create fellowship programs through their state universities that would be administered through their state universities to bring more local journalists to local communities. And again, I'm not talking about kind of statewide coverage or national coverage, really, restaurant openings and closings, going to commission meetings so people can be more informed. I think it really, I think that it involves all of us, and I hope that, I hope in the legislature there can be some productive discussions about, policies. There are some organizations out there that really are doing some really cool work on, payroll tax credits and things like that. I'm not here to pitch you on this, but I just wanted to mention it because, we are all connected. As a member of the Press Association, I did do some work with NACO. I learned more about legal notices than I ever imagined I would or wanted to know. But, it is important, and we're kind of like all tied together in a certain way. And I think there's going to be hopefully creative ways to move forward. Legal notices is a good example. I think just, the membership of the Press Association's changed over time. We have a lot of digital members now, and but we also have a lot of print members. And I think finding, creative solutions and policies are going to be really key for everybody that relies on journalism and everyone that produces journalism. I really hope I didn't take up too much of your time, but I do think that's my last slide.
No, that was really interesting.
Okay.
I was anxious to hear this one.
Oh, good. I have my
Yeah.
email and phone number up there, so if you do want to get in touch or contact me, that's the best way. But yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Are there any questions for Daniel? Yes, Leanne. I saw you looking at him and taking notes while he was talking.
I certainly did. I would like to say that I'm a great journalist. I own a magazine.
Identify yourself for the record.
But, I'm so sorry. Leanna Carey, Progressive Rancher Magazine.
Thank you.
Truly, I'm not a journalist. I'm a magazine owner, and I'm a network expert, I believe. And the magazine is in its 25th year, and it's called a special issue. It's an industry-based, industry-written, industry-supported magazine that has grown through expert journalism from its own industry. So occasionally I'll write something out there that's funny or a poem or something. I am dyslexic. Many people find that really funny that I own a magazine because I'm so dyslexic, but it worked, And the magazine is very, very well respected because it is a magazine that supports its industry. So I would have to say facts man facts.
Yeah.
But you have a silo. We are all in our own silos. The left doesn't read the right doesn't read the left. In the middle, there's very few people in the middle anymore. They're bailing. At this point in politics, we have people bailing out of the Republican Party, bailing out of the Democratic Party, and they're going independent because they don't like the rhetoric. And I understand, I don't like the rhetoric. But the fact is, when you have only a certain amount of water and you have the population that grows past the amount of water that we have. That's the issue. And when you have development that continues and continues without the basis of the water availability, that's an issue. I find it a crime. It's a crime. Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, this is Chris Mahana. May I make a comment?
Of course, Chris, thank you.
Yeah, Daniel, good to hear your presentation again. I just wanted to commend Daniel in getting this presentation out in yet another forum. Daniel, as Jeff mentioned, was on the conjunctive management panel that we organized for NWRA that consisted of Justice Hardesty, Assemblyman Watts, reps from Colorado and Idaho, and a legal representative representing the mining industry. And we decided to add Daniel to the panel, something a little bit different from NWRA to offer the journalistic perspective. So glad to see Jeff brought in before you folks. And I guess a question for Daniel, maybe I missed it, but are you still in the process of writing your book, and how is that coming?
Thanks, Chris. And I should say I got this mug on that panel, so I brought it back for this one. I am still working on my book project. It's a little slow going. I have a lot of archival material to go through, but I am still working on it. And if anyone has thoughts or ideas, I'm all ears.
Well, what's your book about?
So I mentioned
An autobiography?
Oh gosh, no, that'd be so boring. No, my book really is about it's about looking at water development over the last kind of 150 or so years in the Great Basin, and how things came to be sort of over appropriated and overused, and some of the tensions that's created in different communities. So I think in the book, hopefully there's a lot of different perspectives that are included. Some perspectives people might agree with, some perspectives people might disagree with, but the idea is to kind of bring people together in that sort of way and get people thinking about what the future might look like. And again, it's sort of looking at kind of what some of the assumptions that were made, some of the decisions that were made in the past, especially around this question of surface water and groundwater development, and how the two are sort of now being managed in some places together, and have been managed together in the past. So that really, I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm still working on it.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Are you still going to call it scarcity, or are you still working on other potential titles?
Oh, I don't know. Chris has been asking me about titles for a long time. I actually I think scarcity is still a working title. I don't want to reveal too much. I think that maybe working in something with capture, the idea of capture is kind of interesting to me, groundwater capture and just the way that water is, captured for use. But I actually may not have too much of a say in it. My editor might be the final decider. So.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Chris.
Any other questions for Daniel? Daniel, you did a terrific job.
Thank you.
It was very interesting.
I appreciate
Thank you for
that.
joining us.
Thanks.
Do you have
Madam
business
Chair?
cards you could
I
leave?
don't, unfortunately. Have
Oh, that's okay. We have your contact information there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did someone
Madam-
have a question?
Yes, this is Commissioner Haas from Humboldt County.
Sure, go right ahead.
Daniel, thank you very much.
Thanks.
You're a breath of fresh air. The reporting we've got on most of the water has been done by big dollars, not necessarily the mines, but other big dollars that all they want to do is put businesses in. They don't care whether we have water rights as far as individuals are concerned, and we all have water rights for that. I will make this very short. I will be in contact with you And I would like to do some more discussions with you, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Any other questions? Daniel, thank you again. It was A1. We're going to jump ahead on our agenda to item number 9 and have a discussion on activities related to the 2025 legislative session. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's quite a bit here, but let's kind of just walk through it. The first thing I want to mention is that as we've been reporting on, there has been a group of water stakeholders meeting over the last, probably now going on more than 6 months. And it's a pretty broad-based group, includes mining, includes the environmental and conservation community, includes Southern Meadow Water Authority, Truckee Meadows Water Authority, myself representing CNRWA and HRBWA, Chris Mann and Jake Tibbetts and Doug Busselman are also part of the group. So it's pretty broad-based. And really the idea was to get together early on before the 2025 legislative session and see if we couldn't come up with some commonality or consensus on what we would like to see perhaps as a, quote, an omnibus water bill that we could bring forward to the 2025 legislature. And the timing, of course, is such that we are in the interim between legislative sessions, but during that interim, as in every interim, there are joint interim standing committees, and that process has evolved over the years, I guess. There used to be the Public Lands Committee, which was a separate sort of appointed committee that dealt with all the public lands, natural resources, and water issues in the state. It was probably 2 sessions ago when that was changed. So now the interim committee that deals with natural resources is the Joint Interim Natural Resources Committee, and there's a subcommittee on public lands, and it's kind of depends on what the topic is, but generally the Public Lands Committee has been dealing with the water issues. The full Joint Interim Natural Resources Committee has also been talking about or listening to water resource issues, and in fact, I did a presentation along with others on the Water Rights Retirement Program for the full committee. And so it's all sort of come to a culmination here with the joint committee and the Public Land Subcommittee will hold their final meeting, which is really a workshop on August 23rd, or work session, I should say, on August 23rd in Carson City. I'm sure it'll be video conference to other locations and probably streamed as well. But that committee, full committee, has 14 bill draft requests, including at least 4 that will be brought forward by the Public Lands Subcommittee. And so there was a solicitation for recommendations. That deadline was July 31st. And also people have sort of been recommending things, for the Joint Committee's consideration over the course of the last 4 or 5 months. And so this stakeholder working group put together this omnibus bill. It was sent to the chair of the Joint Interim Committee on Natural Resources, Chair Pizzina. And you may notice in the packet, the cover letter includes all the signatories, but it does not include necessarily their affiliation, for the reason that I couldn't commit, any support or anything in this omnibus bill on behalf of CNRWA or HRBWA, just like the others couldn't necessarily commit that on behalf of their respective organizations. So we left it as individuals, and really the key piece, in my opinion, in this omnibus bill is the Water Rights Retirement Program, making that a legislatively approved program. And I'm not going to go through the details, but there was a lot of discussion, a lot of good work put into this language. There's also provisions in here related to Southern Nevada Water Authority's ongoing conservation program, primarily related, I think, to clarifying some things in that, it was at AB 356 that Daniel alluded to, and then also their septic tank conversion program as well. And so that was submitted to the committee, and the committee, as we speak, I think, is reviewing, or the chair and staff are reviewing these recommendations. We don't know how many people submitted things, or what was submitted, or who submitted, because all of the recommendations have not been posted yet. And so we'll just wait and see. As far as the things that, so they have this, the other things that were submitted, because I submitted them on behalf of both the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority and CNRWA, are, I think, 5 BDR requests. One is to continue funding for the Nevada State Cloud Seeding Program, which really affects the Humboldt Basin, but it's a statewide program. And that was submitted on behalf of the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, and that would be a $1.2 million appropriation to the Desert Research Institute to continue cloud seeding for the next biennium. Let's see, on behalf of both CNRWA and HRBWA, going back and taking a look at the basin assessments. There was a bill last session that tried to address some issues with those basin assessments that are imposed on irrigators in designated basins where there is an assessment. And our concern was really brought to light, I think, in the previous 2 legislative sessions, or at least in the GovRec budgets, where basin assessments, the account is an account that that is held by the Division of Water Resources through basin assessments imposed by the state engineer, but really collected by the counties at the direction of the state engineer for work, specialized work in those designated basins. Well, what happened in the previous 2 Governor Rec budgets was that those basin assessments were used to supplant state general fund dollars for Division of Water Resources purposes, and we believe that that was inappropriate, and as a result of that, those activities, many of those activities in the designated basins from which the assessments were being collected were impacted negatively. So field staff were not as present, and a lot of the activities really were diminished. And so we try to correct that. Fortunately, last session, we were able to get that reversed in the final state budget, but as long as the state engineer has the authority, the sole authority to impose these assessments, increase the assessments, and use them in their budget without really, I believe, as much transparency as needed, we're potentially going to have this problem whenever the state runs into a budget problem. And for many of my former county commissioners at NACO, they know what that looks like in terms of how local funds are have been swept in the past for state purposes. And so we want to try to avoid that, and I think we'll see if that's something that the committee recommends going forward. And then also, the groundwater boards, the county groundwater boards. And I want to spend just a minute on this one because the previous 2 sessions, CNRWA requested and Senator Gokachia sponsored bills to authorize the boards, individual boards of county commissioners, to create their own county groundwater boards for working both proactively and trying to address issues with designated basins within their counties. And in the first iteration of that in 2021, the bill got a hearing but did not move out of committee. That was, you'll recall, during the legislature's during the COVID that session, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity to get that bill moved. And we learned a lot from that process. So in 2023, Senator Gokachia again sponsored a bill for us, and that was Senate Bill 180. We made a lot of changes to try to address some of the concerns that were raised by the state engineer with respect to what would happen if a county groundwater board, for example, made a recommendation and it wasn't implemented by the state engineer. What would the liability be, or potential for lawsuits? For example, what would the impact be on staffing, at the division to work with some of these local groundwater boards? So we try to address that. And as it turned out, the bill passed out of both houses unanimously. However, in the House, in the Assembly, even though the bill was passed out 42-0, the Assembly Natural Resources Committee put an amendment on the bill, and the Senate did not accept the amendment, so they had to go to conference committee. Well, that conference committee didn't meet until the last day of the session, and I think it was 8:20 in the afternoon, or 8:20 in the evening, when they finally agreed to, the Senate conferees finally agreed to accept the Assembly amendment. So there was an agreement, but they couldn't get it across the finish line with 3.5 hours to go before the end of the legislative session. As it turns out, the reason that there wasn't a conference committee held sooner, it was not as a result of the merits of the bill, but for other reasons, which included someone inserting some language in this bill that had absolutely nothing to do with water, groundwater boards. And so the question, so that's what happened last session. During the stakeholder working group discussions, there was a provision in that omnibus bill, again, to create county groundwater boards, but it was more general in nature. But my objection, and I asked it that it be taken out, primarily because it appeared that what sort of the idea was that these groundwater boards would advise their county commissioners, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that also there was still no connection or direct legislative, I guess, intent to make sure that what the local groundwater boards would be working on and recommending would necessarily be considered by the Division of Water Resources, which I believe is absolutely critical for there to be that level of cooperation between, well, as Daniel pointed out, local people and groundwater boards and the Division of Water Resources. So, and then there was also a provision in there about the basin assessments in that omnibus bill as well, and getting the boards of county commissioners involved in the basin assessments in terms of their authority to increase them or something like that. But that was taken out, and I thought that it was really important to have a standalone BDR recommendation. So my question to this board, and I need to get back to the Legislative Council Bureau on this today, is do we want to go ahead and, well, first of all, do we want to continue with the recommendation for local groundwater boards, number one? And if we do we want to just go ahead and resubmit the language in SB 180, which, but for, I believe, reasons unrelated to the merits of the bill, probably would have been sent to the governor, and whether or not the governor would have signed the bill or not remains to be seen, but it got a 21-0 vote in the Senate and 42-0 vote in the Assembly. Or do we want to take a different approach and maybe provide some general language that talks about groundwater boards really not getting into, looking at various day-to-day activities or administrative items, things like, applications, and looking at whether or not these groundwater boards would support or protest, new appropriations, or getting into, just a lot of this, more of the day-to-day work, which, may be less burdensome, if you will, on the Division of Water Resources, although I'm not sure there really is a big impact. But nonetheless, and maybe focus a little bit more, and having these groundwater boards focus a little bit more on, one, what are the things that the local community can do to address overpumped basins that are already overpumped before they become critical management areas, if they do become a critical management area, to avoid that. Or number two, before you even get to that point, like I said, you can either be reactive and try to address an overpump basin, or you could try to put together some ideas and recommendations for local solutions to prevent a community or a groundwater basin from becoming overpumped, and work, with their boards of county commissioners to figure out what's realistic, what's implementable, what would the community support. But there still, in my opinion, needs to be that direct connection and cooperation, collaboration between the local groundwater boards and the Division of Water Resources. And so we could potentially put together some language or a recommendation for a BDR to do something more like that, as opposed to getting into some of the more, day-to-day administrative activities, which was really kind of that first bill that was submitted back in 2021 for groundwater boards. Or just drop the whole idea and not do anything with groundwater boards at the county level at all, which, is
Do we
is
want to have a
possibility.
discussion on that?
I would like to hear some thoughts on that and see.
Everybody look at Norm.
Do we want to follow through on this this request for BDR? Do we want to resubmit SB 180, or do we want to do something a little bit different and make it a little bit more general in terms of what a local groundwater board authorized by the Board of County Commissioners can actually do to help improve the situation in their communities?
Okay.
Jeff and I had a lengthy discussion. Initially, I'm not in favor of groundwater boards. Just coming from a county commission of 3, when you serve on 15 other committees, county commissions need one more thing to do. But when you come from a county commission of 5 or 6 and you're serving on those same committees, or 7, it's a different situation. And I think as long as it stays enabling legislation, I think that's a
agree.
good thing, gives the county the option to or not to. But somehow we've got to get it into our communities that we've got to pay attention to water. And as we saw in our report from Daniel, that communities we don't get it out in front of the community enough. Maybe this would be an opportunity to get water resources out in front of the community. I know this community is one of very few, if not the only one, that has a groundwater monitoring program that we do a lot in protecting. I noticed the maps that you had in your report showed that Churchill County, the basin here, is one that's way overpumped. But we also protect our irrigation water, and that shows up over in the FAR map on the side that shows that we're stable. Well, it's because we monitor it, we protect our irrigation, we protect our groundwater recharge, and those things can come through a groundwater board. So I would support going for the legislation the way it finally passed out without the darn amendment that killed it, and support a bill for groundwater boards.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Strickland here, speaking from experience of having a groundwater board, the Nye County Water District Governing Board. I will do some reporting at end of this meeting, and I can tell you that this board is very proactive, very important, and as Norm stated, it makes us pay attention. It makes us puts us to work on the subject. Out of sight, out of mind, as we have heard, is what most people do. So I'm very much in support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Another
Madam
comment.
Chair, Cody Alders. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead,
Cody,
Norm.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Let Norm. I interrupted him. Apologize.
Just, if you don't pay attention, pretty soon you end up like a picture that Mike Turnipseed showed me one time of a pump house standing on top of the well casing. Bottom of the pump house you couldn't touch. A person couldn't touch it. The groundwater subsidence or the land subsidence underneath that well That's what happens when you don't pay attention. And by the time that thing went down 6 inches, it's too late. It's too late. We end up with another Pahrump Valley problem. And we got to get to where we pay more attention.
Thanks, Norm. Cody?
Yeah, Lori, Commissioner Carson had to get off the line, but in White Pine County, we've had a water advisory board for many years that now we have combined into a natural resource board, combining PLUAC and water advisory into one board. And I think Commissioner Vogler is still on the line, but I think the Natural Resource Board in White Pine County brings a lot of things to the commission that may be overlooked, and so I feel like it's an important board for these counties to have. That's all.
Thank you, Cody. And the legislation would be enabling, right, Norm or Jeff?
Yes, and you know, there already is an existing statute, and it was really for a single purpose for the Las Vegas Valley Basin many years ago that established these county groundwater boards, and there was one established, and then again was in the Las Vegas Basin. Since that time, I know Eureka County tried to establish their own board, but because of the way the statutes are written, it requires the governor to approve the board and appoint the members,
Yeah.
and so that never happened for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And so all we're trying to do is take that concept,
You're just trying to create an opportunity.
create an opportunity. That's
Yeah.
the best way to put it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Anybody else? Any other
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Nancy Boland.
Commissioner Boland?
As all Norm and you know, and Jeff, I am in favor of these boards, and I really think that having a formal board, if the county desires, would make for clearer communication between Division of Water Resources and the county and their issues. Thank you.
And Nancy, we were talking earlier this morning before the meeting that the opportunity to create an appointed board like this gives the function legitimacy. Are we ready for a motion on this?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Commissioner Haas.
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
I would be very much in support of a bill for groundwater. We're having major issues in Humboldt County with not having any representation for the public, for the people that own property, that have rights and whatnot. And I think local board would be more supportive in defining those rights and understanding what's going on. They want to just keep, letting people use the water that isn't there. Our groundwater up here is going down in all of Humboldt County, and nobody has been able to do anything about bringing this to the attention of the public and to get something done about it. And I think, with more support from the local people in every county is going to be better for all of us to bring back a reasonable use of the water. And I can't commend enough on this buying back the water rights and try and get the basins back into a use that the basin can produce. So, thank you.
Thank you. So it sounds like we have a general consensus. Would someone like to put that in the form of a motion? I think Norm's ready with.
Well, it could be either or. So if you want to be specific and support resubmitting SB 180 as was in the first reprint of SB 180, you could do that. That makes my life a lot easier. But there's also the option of submitting more general language that would, basically just talk about a county being able to establish, so these would be the parameters, basically. Board of County Commissioners would establish this groundwater board. There'd be certain conditions, but those boards would be empowered to develop recommendations, make recommendations to not only their boards of county commissioners, but also to the Division of Water Resources. And really, I think the most important aspect of all this is to make sure that the Division of Water Resources and these local groundwater boards and the boards of county commissioners are communicating, because, you know, what's the point of having a local groundwater board created by a board of county commissioners if there isn't some assurance that there's going to be the collaboration in putting it together, the
It's just like
cooperation?
any water
and-
board.
and-
What's the
right.
sense of having a county water
Coordination,
board
so-
if you don't consider
Yeah.
all areas? Yeah.
I mean, we could take the SB 180 bill, resubmit it, and we could work on it between now, you know, any amendments that might be needed between now
Right.
and the time it's published, but, so to answer your question, that is one option, is to just, you know, direct me to move forward with resubmitting. SB
Wildy,
180.
is that what you want to do? Is that your motion? Could you turn your mic on? Could you turn your mic on and turn on your mic, your
No.
microphone?
Don't let him talk.
Yeah.
I would propose that we start with the legislation that we had last year. It was 181?
180.
180, and build on what we have learned. I don't mind the changes, but just as long as it is enabling legislation, that the
Yeah.
county can do it if it chooses to.
Yes.
Second.
All right, there's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Frey. It has been seconded by Commissioner Bruff. Are there any questions concerning that motion? Any additional discussion or questions for Jeff? Is there any opposition to that motion? Here,
Does that, I got one, just one more, does that concern only groundwater then? Okay, thanks.
all right.
And to be more specific, that bill, SB 180, concerns only those groundwater basins that have been designated by the state engineer under NRS 434, whatever the chapter is. So there are only maybe half of the groundwater basins that the state engineer has designated.
All right. Well, there's a motion and there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any opposition to that motion? With no opposition, that motion passes. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we don't know what everybody is submitting or, you know, what has been submitted, but just, there are a couple things we do know. One is, I'll just tell you that we received some information. about a
James, when you get a minute?
request.
Yes, please.
That we will expect to see from the Great Basin Water Network.
Could
for-
everybody on the telephone please mute your microphones if you're not speaking?
So, this concept for a BDR would be
Yeah, me too.
to allow water right holders to conserve a portion of their water for conservation measures, which is sort of one of the problems with effective conservation, because under the use it or lose it requirement, you know, there are instances where water right holders will pump water even though they don't necessarily need to pump the water in order to demonstrate or prove up, you know, beneficial use, and not run up against the 5-year requirement to do that. And I know the Division of Water Resources has tried to be as lenient as possible to allow people to not pump for conservation measures without running afoul of the law, but at some point, there may need to be some clear provision to recognize that there have been attempts in the past to try to do that. In this case, I think, again, it's a laudable goal. The question is, how do you do that without, one, you know, creating a situation where you could potentially have speculation taking place and just other aspects of it. So this is more of a conceptual concept, you know, conceptual idea at this point, and we'll just, you know, work through the Senate and WR Legislative Committee to work on some of these items. There is also, as I mentioned at one of our previous meetings, the Center for Biological Diversity has early on submitted a recommendation to the interim, joint interim committee to look at a study of lithium extraction and water resources in the state, and doing a study to determine how that should be done and what are the safeguards that need to take place, given that there are, well, as someone pointed out in the monthly reports, just pages and pages of applications for lithium exploration and lithium extraction, or lithium pumping in, for example, Clayton Valley. So we'll see where that goes. And then lastly, I just wanted to bring up something that we're not sure if this will appear or not at some point during this legislative session, but there were a group of folks working together. I was not one of them, but it's, citizens, water right owners, and professional practitioners. That includes engineers and attorneys, I guess. But they were promoting, I guess, an idea about initiating a statewide discussion focusing on, quote, modernization of the Division of Water Resources and its policies and practices. And so there were a lot of ideas floated. I think they were scheduled at one time to do a presentation before the Joint Interim Natural Resources Committee. That did not go forward, but there were some really interesting ideas: modernization or modernizing the implementation of current Nevada water statutes, educating legislators, creating a legislative water caucus, increasing the transparency within the division generally, and creating having the governor establish a blue ribbon task force, if you will, to sort of look at the details and processes within the Division of Water Resources. I think the issue, I mean, I don't know what necessarily prompted this, but some of the things that I know people have been concerned about, and I'm not necessarily saying we support them or not, but the issues that have been raised, for example, in a broad sense are, one, Nevada's water law, use it or lose it, and prior appropriation aren't really working in, today's environment or, current situation in the state of Nevada, because those laws were enacted decades ago and Nevada's a different place, and, so forth and so on. Another issue raised is there aren't very many legislators that really understand water, and this is a really important topic. And, that's one of the reasons why we try to get some of these issues addressed early on before the session. So
That's the scary part
we
of
don't-
submitting a BDR.
yeah, so we don't have legislators, asking some
Right.
very basic questions about water law, and, we sort of just have to kind of do some of that stuff. So there's also that. The hearing process, the administrative hearing process at the Division of Water Resources has come under some scrutiny lately in terms of whether or not they should be subject to the Nevada Administrative Procedures Act, and the overall workload and so forth at the division. So these are just some of the ideas. I don't want to get into the details of this because we don't know if it's going to move forward or not, whether it was even submitted to the interim committee. The last item I do want to bring up, though, is we do know that the Division of Water Resources is submitting in their budget request to the budget office, the state budget office, additional funding or continuation of funding, I should say, for continuation of their Nevada Water Initiative, and that's basically the effort to update water budgets, and they got some funding last session. It was, I think, primarily, and maybe even in the special session, ARPA money to start that process. There are 256 groundwater basins in the state of Nevada. They're currently studying 2. Railroad Valley, being in the central region, is 1, and Pine Valley in the Humboldt region. And what they're doing is doing pretty intensive modeling. I think they're using USGS, they're cost sharing with USGS, to develop basically the methodology for updating the perennial yields and doing the water budgets. And the idea is to use the knowledge that's implementing those methodologies in those two basins to sort of use those as the template for updating the water budgets in other basins. But I know they want to expand the number of basins they do this in, and so they're asking for additional funds. And in your packet is a letter, draft letter that, again, this stakeholder working group kind of worked on in terms of just general support. We think it's really important for groups like ours, and if you may recall, this board was one of the first, if not the first, organization to support the Division of Water Resources budget request for the 2023 session, and we did that pretty early on in the process.
Very early.
And so, I don't know, it would be, if you want to take a vote on this particular item, to send this letter, it would probably be sent sometime after September 1st. It's in your packet. I think it's a letter that should be sent by this board.
Jeff, I absolutely agree. It was a great letter. I wouldn't change a word. I'll entertain a motion on that. It's in your backup.
I would make that motion.
There's a, you want to turn your mic on, Roger? There's a motion by Commissioner Mancebo, yes, to approve sending this letter. Is there a second? Second by Chris Wagonseller. Any questions concerning the motion or additional questions for this item? Jeff, anything else? Is there any opposition to the motion? With no opposition, that motion carries.
Next item.
Yeah, Wildy, go ahead.
I have a question. I hope it's a quick one. And it doesn't have to do with underground water. It has to do with with surface water. And I think that went through the legislature, if I'm not mistaken, over 30 years ago, that they adjudicate all the waters in the state of Nevada. And they were going to do it in like the next 5 years then, and that's been a long time ago. And they're saying now that they won't ever get it done in my lifetime, or probably younger people's lifetime. So what, should we be working on that a little bit? Is that a...
It's a great question. So there, as I mentioned, 256 groundwater basins. The surface water resources are basically adjudicated for the most part. You've got federal decrees, you've got state decrees like in the Humboldt, you've got the federal decrees on the Truckee and I guess Walker, for example. And of course, we don't really get involved in anything on the Colorado per se, but it's really the groundwater basins where the issue is, and that is a very long process. And the Division of Water Resources is doing them one at a time, as far as I can tell. I think they have a system for prioritizing which groundwater basins to prioritize for adjudication.
Are they working on it?
They're working on it, but it's a slow process, and I mean, just the requirements to get that done, the due process, because people can challenge and they should. And then once administratively that gets done, then you've got to go to a court and just all of that. So it's just the timeline, the amount of work necessary to do an adjudication. I think Cold Springs Valley in Washoe County was the last basin they adjudicated, and I kind of looked at the record, and I was just overwhelmed with the amount of information and legal proceedings that needed to take place in order for that one basin to get done. So to answer your question, it's not going to get done anytime soon, but as long as you're making progress and there's a recognition that it needs to be done, I think that's how it's going to work out, because it's also very, not only time-consuming, but very expensive to adjudicate a basin.
It won't get any simpler as time goes on.
That's true too. Well, that's right, because a lot of the determination is based on historical data.
There'll be more people mixed up in the whole deal, and
So, I guess this is just my personal opinion, but if I were a water right holder in a basin that isn't adjudicated, I think I would hold on to as much of make sure I
That you
have
can.
paper copies and historical data of everything that I have in that basin, so.
Leanne?
This is a simple question. You can't adjudicate what you're not sure you have, is that correct?
Ooh.
Well, you can adjudicate what you have on paper as issued in your water right, in your permit or certificate. But in terms of trying to figure out, what the overall amount of water available in that basin is a whole separate situation, and right, but why that's important is because, in a particular basin, the day may come where there is no choice but to curtail water, and that's where the adjudication process is absolutely critical, right? So.
Jeff, anything else on this item?
Forgot what item we're on. What are we on?
We are on
Sorry.
the legislative session, 9.
Oh, yeah.
just passed that motion.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry.
Are we ready to move on?
Yes,
to-
I'm sorry,
oh,
yes,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, we're moving on to item 10, which is a discussion and possible action regarding water right applications.
Were we on 10 or were we on, I'm sorry.
We were on 9, and I asked, is there anything else on 9?
Oh, yes, no, okay, you're right.
Okay, so we're ready? Yeah. All right, 10, water rights applications. Albemarle's been busy.
Yeah, so what you'll find in here, just a couple of things. I didn't see anything on these monthly reports of real concern, although there might be one I'll point out, but as the chair indicated, Albemarle has been very busy. There are a lot of change applications, as to be expected in some basins, including by the mines. You might note on the very first 2 pages, and that would be M&N Ventures LLC, which is on the first page of August, 93798, 93799, and then on the second page, 93811 and 93812, Denali Farms. Those change applications are a direct result of the Water Rights Retirement Program.
Oh.
And basically, under that program, each water right holder that retires their water rights is entitled to keep up to 2 acre-feet of water per quarter section of land that had been irrigated, associated with that land, primarily for mitigation, to try to keep a cover crop on there. And so that's what those applications are for, and we appreciate the Division of Water Resources getting those published, and they have to be noticed now under the new law because they're
Yeah.
going to be permanent changes, really.
There was a lot of domestic.
A lot of domestic, those are
Nye
relinquishments
County.
in Nye County, so as you
Yeah.
know, in Basin 162.
Yeah.
For, new connections and so forth, and new parceling, you have to
Mm-hmm.
dedicate water rights. There's an application, and it's July, and it's 93729 by the Nevada Department of Transportation. It's one of 3. Actually, there's 2 in the Central Region, 133 and 163. There's no information. I'm not sure what's going on there. They may be revamping or remodeling or establishing some new watering locations on their highways. I'll find out what's going on there. Let's see. A lot of stock water applications. We typically don't get too concerned about those. And, let's see here. Oh. There is an application, Elko County, and maybe Commissioner Bruff knows this, and this is in May, and it's application 93479. It's the Egbert Family Trust. it's for 1,280 acre feet for irrigation. Typically, if it's a change application, they put the base permit as part of the change in the change column. I didn't see that there. I looked at the application. It appears maybe it is a change application, but it's not clear, so I'll keep an eye on that, unless anybody has any information about what exactly is going on with that.
Hey, Jeff, or Madam Chair.
Yeah, please.
I looked at that one as well. Just note, Clover Valley is already over appropriated. But from what I could tell, it's not real clear, but I think that maybe they're seeking it'll be under a total combined duty. So it wouldn't be additive is the way I read it, but their application's a little messy to try to understand what they're doing, but I think that's what they're trying to do.
Thank you.
And again, per our CNRWA's policy, we wouldn't protest that application unless the Elko County felt it was something they wanted to protest as well, so we would defer to them on it.
Commissioner Bruff, would you turn your microphone on? That's okay.
The Pilot Peak applications, those might be in contention with Elko County.
Could you let me know?
I'll have to.
Yeah, and I guess with that information, is that something that the board would want me to move forward with if Elko County protested that application?
We just might want you to do that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, I would note those are not in the central region, though.
You would what?
I would note that those Pilot Peak applications are not within.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at then we're looking at the wrong, different
okay.
application. I apologize, you're right.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
They're what?
Jay.
They're in the Humboldt region, which we would do in.
Different Pilot Peak.
I think they're within they're not even within the Humboldt region. I think they're,
That says Elko.
I know, but Basin 191, I believe is,
Might be the Oahe.
that's the Great Salt Lake Basin.
That's right, okay. Thanks, Jake. Application going way back to May 93495. Esmeralda Minerals in Basin 143, that was protested by Albemarle. Let's see what else. And let's see. Applications 93406, 93407 back in April, those were protested by Esmeralda County, I believe. Basin 142.
Can I ask a couple questions, maybe?
Yeah, Jake, feel free, go right ahead.
I know Jeff said we typically don't get concerned on the stock water rights, and we don't typically, but it's just the same as, it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. So if you look, maybe Cody might have information on this, but in Steptoe Valley, there's the Chris Collis applications for quite a few new stock wells. And if you remember, Steptoe Valley is severely over appropriated. The perennial yield's 70,000 and there's 137,000 acre foot of water rights on the books. So I'm not clear if the state engineer would have granted these anyways, but you look at each individual application, it's less than it's 4.5 acre feet, but he's applying for quite a few. Anyways, it's just one of those that, it seems minimal but cumulatively, it's all those little amounts that add up. So I do think we should watch those. Another one is application 93559, and that's in Teals Marsh Valley. And that valley is over appropriated as well. And so this would be a new it just continues to add, a couple acre foot here and there, and eventually you look back and say, oh my gosh, there's thousands of acre foot we appropriated under a 2 acre foot every time. So
Yeah, you're right. That's a great point.
Thank you, Jake. It is a great point. And then one last thing I want to mention on this agenda item is the Solidus mining applications in Buena Vista Valley and Pershing County. There were 17 applications filed. CNRWA did not protest the applications. The Humboldt River Basin Water Authority protested one application. It was, I forget which one, but it was their application for dewatering. Since that time, Pershing County Commissioner Hudson asked for CNRWA support since we did a fairly decent review of those applications. And Pershing County did protest all of the, I think, 17 applications. I actually filed them on behalf of Pershing County because I live in Carson City, so I was able to get the protest in on time. All that is to say that we did get the response from Solidus to the protests that were filed, both by Humboldt River Basin Water Authority and Pershing County. And by the way, Buena Vista Valley is in the central region. The protest did, I think, exactly what we would expect, and that is prompted a request for a meeting. And of course, one of the main reasons that the protests were filed is because we just didn't know. This is particularly with the dewatering operation, massive amounts of water in a closed basin, we believe, but lots of little streams, and I shouldn't say streams, but springs, and there were a number of water right holders in that valley that were very concerned and brought their concerns to the Pershing County Commission. So Solidus reached out to us. I had Dave Berger, who's on contract with us, to look at this. He and I are going to meet with them next Tuesday to go over the groundwater modeling, because that groundwater model that they utilized to put their applications together and as part of their information for the EIS referenced a model that we never saw. And so this will be the first chance that we have to sit down, and I will with Dave Berger, to look at the model and get some more information about these applications and why they believe there aren't any issues or impacts either in the basin itself or that could propagate out into the Humboldt region. And so I guess that's the benefit of filing protests, even if you don't have a lot of scientific data. I mean, if nothing else, it would prompt the applicants to provide that and sit down and go over a lot of this information. So anyway, that's it on this report.
Thank you, Jeff. Any comments or questions from authority members? We are going to move right along to the Executive Director report to CNRWA. Jeff, anything you want to add?
Just a couple quick things. State Division of Water Resources, their planning division is continuing to work on the state water plan. It's behind schedule. We had hoped to get something done. I know they had as well earlier, but we're now looking at probably a spring to summer 2025 document being released for comments. There's a stakeholder working group again on that. I participate on that working group, and so that's continuing. And recently, Esmeralda County was able to get on a Zoom call with the State Water Planning Division to kind of work through the county's water resource management plan to try to make sure that, they're being aligned and that their concerns about what's going on in Esmeralda County are considered in the state's plan. Mm-hmm. I would also note that the Nevada Division of Water Resources, if you haven't gone to their website, and maybe you don't utilize it, but they revamped their website. It's up and running, their new website, effective August 6th. I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but the little time I have spent on it, it appears to me that it's an improvement, more functional, a little bit easier to navigate, and there are a lot of tools, and maybe at a future meeting, it might be helpful for us to kind of do a test drive on the new website and show everybody what the functionality is, which is something I'd hope we would do in the past anyway when we thought it was going to come out earlier. And then the last item is, in your packet is comment letter that I sent on behalf of CNRWA July 31st in response to the Division of Water Resources proposed regulations, which have been ongoing for some time, on how they conduct administrative hearings. This is really interesting because, if you've ever participated in an administrative hearing at the Division of Water Resources, it's a very defined process. We want to make sure, first and foremost, that it doesn't exclude people, particularly individual water right holders, from participating and having meaningful engagement and participation in these hearings. But we're also wondering about how this is all going to apply with things like other types of hearings that the Division of Water Resources holds, including those on adopting new regulations. And so there are a lot of questions. I mean, the division seems to be revising what they're proposing, based on comments, and many of which we presented as well as others. I think my personal opinion in all this is we don't want to have hearings before the state engineer only for attorneys and hydrogeologists. And we think it's really important that individual water right holders who just want to come in and either represent themselves in protest of an application or to defend their own water rights should be able to do so without having to go through this whole quasi-judicial process and sort of be excluded from participating in these hearings. So that's really the primary, I think, concern expressed in this letter. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Jeff? We'll move along to board member and executive director comments. Jeff, anything to add to your report? I need to hear from the board members first. Or do you want to question Jeff? Yeah, quickly, please.
I'll be quick. With each county requiring...
Leanne,
with
just announce.
Leanna Carey, Progressive Rancher Magazine. So sorry. Jeff, with each county supposedly having a water plan, could you explain to me if each county does have their water plan in existence, and how often are they supposed to update it?
Leanne, I think that is certainly something you can ask Jeff after the meeting is over. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to move along to the directors now. Directors, any comments? The floor is open. Yes, Ralph Keyes.
Commissioner Keyes. Commissioner Keyes, Esmeralda County. We are in the middle of updating our water resource plan. You should do it every so many years, 10 years approximately. And
Sir, pull your mic closer. Thank you.
I'll move closer.
There you go.
We are in the process of updating our water resource plan as we speak. There's lots of questions. We have many demands on our waters in Esmeralda County for mining, lithium exploration, lithium development, and agriculture is one of our main consumptors of water. But we're being inundated with mining exploration for lithium, and we're trying to get our head around that, what they're going to require for water. We've protested some water rights for some of the developers. We also have 10 huge solar projects that are proposed in our county, which are taking a close look at. We don't know how much water they're going to need and so on. So we're trying to put up some safeguards right now in our water resource plan. I want to thank Jeff for having Bunny Bishop meet with us here a week or so ago, setting that up because we had lots of questions for the water Department of Water Resources, the planning department. And we do hire experts. We do have hydrogeologists that we contract with to look over things. And we do a lot of protests, unfortunately, and at a great expense to the county. So, some of these permits that the State Water Engineer's Office allows...
Are you prevailing on them? Are you prevailing? Are you winning them?
We're in the process at the moment. So there's these big, huge global mining companies that we're, attempting to understand better and what their demands of the water will be. So it's a big deal to us, and it's happening right now, and we're just a small, poor county, and we ask for help quite often, and I've learned not to be so prideful not to ask for help. And I want to
Yeah.
thank Jeff for helping out and all you guys too, so, with your support from this board.
Well,
So,
you'll
thank
always
you.
have it. Thank you. Directors, any other comments? I'd like to bring up that I was
I do,
reading.
Chair. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Are you sure you should go first, Chair?
Well, I just want to, this actually ties into Nye County, Commissioner Strickland. I just wanted to
Perfect.
say that I read on the front page of the Pahrump Valley Times this morning that it says the Water District gets $10 million. That's not what the body of the article said. There was a bill apparently that was introduced. It has passed the Senate. It's pending passage in the House and then has to be signed by Joe Biden. But that's really good news for them if they are able to get that. My understanding also from the article is that it will be spent exclusively in the Pahrump Valley. So, Commissioner, do you want to add anything to that?
That is exactly one of the three things I wanted to bring to light.
Well, you go
from
right
the-
ahead and dogpile on this item.
August 13th, which was this past Tuesday, the Nye County Water District Governing Board met, and they are potentially going to receive $10 million, as you stated. It's going to be from the Water Resource Development Act. It has passed the Senate, but it still has to pass the House and be signed by the President. So you stated that exactly right. Those resources that money is to be used for water and wastewater infrastructure. That was one thing. I have two more.
In the Pahrump Valley.
You know what?
No, the article said that all 10 million is going to be spent in Pahrump Valley, unless
I didn't see that in the act. I would need clarity from the manager who put in for Dan Weeks, who put in for that. But I didn't
Deborah,
read that in the act.
It's entirely possible that I read this wrong because it says $10 million for environmental infrastructure, including water and wastewater infrastructure, which includes a water well field and pipeline in the Pahrump Valley. So,
If I might,
this
is Dan Weeks.
Oh, Dan, I'm so
thank you,
glad you
Dan.
were able to join us. Thank you.
I've been here most of the time. I had one meeting I had to duck out on to pick up because it was legal. But
So
just for-
everybody knows Dan Weeks is the director of the Nye County Water District Governing Board. Or, no,
just
he's the
for
director
clarity
of the
there.
district. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
The application was made on behalf of the Nye County Water District Governing Board, and the science document that we used in substantiation for the request was the Shaw document, which focuses most of its intellectual and scientific focus on Basin 162 and Pahrump. That doesn't necessarily mean that the monies can only be spent in Pahrump. So if the story indicated that or intimated that,
Dan,
that's kind
I
of
think
out of-
I just interpreted it incorrectly.
Yeah, so most likely the money will be spent in Pahrump because the focus of the Shaw document is on Basin 162 issues. But as you stated, there's still some hills to climb. We've got to get through the halls of justice, so to speak, and then we'll know more once the award's been made. But all indicators are we're optimistic that money will come through.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? So, Dan, I'll just throw something out there. You might want to consider earmarking a portion of that money to retire water rights in Basin 162. Our program has been very, very successful, and I know that 162, I think it's a designated basin, isn't it? Yeah,
It is.
It's highly over-appropriated, so...
And we had some conversation at our last meeting to that effect. That
oh, well, you should keep Jeff's number handy.
well, it's never far away.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. We hope that comes through.
It's essentially 30 years of our annual budget, so it's a pretty big milestone for the board.
Yeah, that is terrific. Good work. I understand that you did all the heavy lifting on writing that grant, so good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Deborah, did you say you had 3 things?
Yeah, I have two more for you.
You go right ahead.
Thank you. Also at that meeting on Tuesday, the board read in an ordinance for the second reading, and that will be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners for consideration. And the ordinance deems that subdivisions will need to provide a 2-to-1 ratio on water rights, the equivalent of 2 being retired and 1 being used, basically, is what this ordinance is going to dictate.
Is that
that
going to
ordinance-
be required countywide or only
Basin 162 only.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And I did have that written down. I'm not sure I read it though. So that is falling in line with our groundwater management plan. That was part of what our plan was supposed to do, and the district is getting that in place now. So I'll give you an example. In some of these subdivisions, they will have a usage of half an acre foot, let's say, for the development. So they would have to bring to the table 1.5 acre feet, put half an acre into use, and retire 1. So that's an example of what's going on here now. I don't know what the Board of County Commissioners is going to do with that, and I don't know what kind of work that's going to cause our planning director.
I don't know what that's going to do to your public comment.
Whew, yeah. Or what lawsuit will entail, right?
Yeah.
And the third thing was very interesting. I don't know if any of the other commissioners will be able to use this, but a white paper was produced based on the Shaw report once again. The agenda item read to compel the State Department of Natural Resources to seek damages for the irreparable harm caused to waters of Nye County through testing of nuclear weapons within the
I saw
confines
that.
of Nevada. Yeah, Nevada
Almost
nuclear
migrating
security site. Oh yeah,
radionuclides.
right. We are definitely monitoring those groundwaters throughout the test site and outlying areas like Beatty is of concern. So we don't want to throw up a big scare, but we also think that we need to be compensated because we will never be able to use those waters.
I thought that monitoring was already going on and had been for many years.
Years and years and years of it, yes. There's a lot of monitoring that's going on here, and we've, of course, working with Desert Research Institute to upgrade the modeling that's been done in the past. So a lot going on here, and so that's why I think everybody, if they can see the need that we see, have a groundwater a board like this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Dan, thank you for participating. Director.
Thank you for having me.
Always our pleasure, believe me. Anything else from the authority members? Anything? Going once, going twice. We are moving into our second public comment period. Again, this time is devoted to comments by the general public. We do not take action on anything brought up under public comment until it's been included as an action item on a future agenda. Is there any public comment? Yes, identify yourself for the record.
Leanna Carey, Progressive Rancher Magazine. Is there any way we could look at, and I say we because I feel part of you, and if I offend you, I'm so sorry, but I'm proud of you guys.
Of course not.
Is there any way we could hire a journalist to do some work for us? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Jake Tibbetts.
Dan Weeks.
Dan Weeks, sorry, you sounded like Jake there for a minute.
Sorry.
No,
if
that's
you
a
would
good
like
thing.
if you would like some elaboration on the white paper that was mentioned, I'd be happy to do that for you. If not, feel free to move along.
I would like it.
Yeah, Jeff will be in contact with you on that.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. Any other public comment? Public comment is closed. This meeting, oh no, wait a minute. We need to set our next meeting. I got ahead of myself. So we're going backwards one. We're going to item 13, which is setting the next meeting. But those of you who have to leave, I totally understand. All of our action items have been taken care of. We're just waiting on Jeff. Yeah, Commissioner, you're not on the record. If, oh, to me? Oh, okay, oh, sorry. Okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
So we typically meet every 3 months,
Yeah.
and,
December?
well, December 6th might be a good day
Sounds good to me.
for everybody, maybe, and we have to check with
The availability of
availability,
the,
Pam, and
Pam?
we'll let us know. but-
Pam, who is working through her lunch hour here. We're good?
Okay, December 6th.
10 a.m. So same bat time, same bat channel, right here. We love meeting in Fallon.
Yeah, and I just want to again, reiterate what you said earlier, Madam Chair. We really, really appreciate
Oh, yeah.
Churchill County and Pam Moore in particular for guiding us through this process, because organizing and running these meetings is difficult enough without having to worry
It's a
about all this
huge
other
job.
stuff. So thank you, Pam.
Yeah. Thank you. And you noticed we didn't have lunch over there. Our in-person participation is dwindling. We are not going to be spending the money on huge lunches like we used to, but there is an assortment of
Krispy Kreme donuts.
Krispy Kreme donuts. I don't think anybody cracked the box, so don't leave without taking something with you. Public comment is closed. We've set our next meeting for December 6th, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. You're all